This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi everyone, Rusty back with your latest Meteo Mundo video. This is a special video for Tropical Storm Tammy. Recording this just after the Thursday 11 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time advisory from the National Hurricane Center. And friends, I'll start off with this. The situation for the northern windward and the leeward islands is getting more serious. Now the Hurricane Center feels like tropical storm conditions are likely throughout the entire northern windward and leeward islands, and potentially even hurricane conditions for the far northern leeward islands on Saturday. There is a lot to get into this video. We'll take it very slowly. I'm going to break down the newest information. We'll get into the forecast and the potential impacts. I first want to start with this advisory just on this broad perspective. I want to go over the newest watches and warnings. There is a hurricane watch for Guadeloupe. It's our first hurricane watch and only includes Guadeloupe. There's also a tropical storm warning for Guadeloupe. So obviously we would expect tropical storm conditions and then potentially hurricane conditions for Guadeloupe. Tropical storm watch is in effect for a lot of areas. They include Barbados, Dominica, Martinique, Antigua, Barbuda, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, Anguilla, and St. Barthélemy, Saba and St. Eustatius, and both St. Martin's, the entire island. If you live there, you know what I'm talking about. So that is the newest watches and warnings. We'll zoom in. I'm going to break it down for you island by island, but I wanted to just give you that overhead perspective. You can see the track from the National Hurricane Center on this 11 a.m. advisory, and you can see towards the ends, when you see that one, that is the Hurricane Center forecasting Tammy to become a Category 1 hurricane, and that could happen as it begins to exit the northern leeward islands. All right, let's look at what Tammy looks like on satellite imagery. Very concentric. The whites are your Howard Clyde tops. Now, it is fighting a little bit of wind shear. Hurricane hunters are going in and out of this storm. They found 60-mile-an-hour sustained winds and some higher gusts. But Tammy, although it's fighting a little bit of wind shear, there's not a lot that's going to stop it from at least slowly strengthening. And that's the forecast from the Hurricane Center right over the next 72 hours as it moves through the northern windward and eventually the leeward islands. There's extremely warm sea surface temperatures that would look to negate any potential wind shear issues. We can take a look at some of the visible satellite imagery as well. And again, on this Thursday morning, we're seeing that very nice and clear here. Now, no defined eye, anything like that. Tammy's not that strong as of yet, but we can see some nice outflow on the northern side. There's still a little bit of raggedness on the western and the southwest sides, but overall very impressive. Low level moisture. I mean, look at this, just really, really tight right in the center of circulation, all of that moisture. Eventually, that's going to clear out if Tammy's going to try and form a bit of an eye. And we hope that doesn't happen. But again, at least some slow strengthening is likely as we move over the next 2 to 3 days. So let's talk about what's going to be happening with the islands. And again, we're going to take it slow. We're looking at the track here. Now, again, for Barbados, you do have a tropical storm watch. I'm hopeful that we actually see the core of Tammy stay north and east of you, okay? But we continue with tropical storm watches as well for Martinique and Dominica and a little bit farther north. So we're just going to kind of go up the islands. Again, all of these are going to be tropical storm watches except for Guadeloupe, which is under a tropical storm warning and a hurricane watch. And the Hurricane Center is already saying, look, more than likely additional watches and warnings will be issued. Now, friends, if you live in these areas, I want you to check in with your local governments for island-specific information. I am giving you the overall forecast, but if you live in these areas and you need to know what to do or you need to know local situations, please check in with your local government. But again, right now on this track, we would have a tropical storm moving very close to Guadeloupe with winds of around 70 miles an hour, potentially some gusts that would be much more in excess of that. So again, talking about sustained winds on the higher end of a potential tropical storm. Moving up the road towards Barbuda, this is where the Hurricane Center potentially has this becoming a minimal tropical storm. So if you live in Anguilla, in St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Martin, and Barbuda, even Antigua, you need to be prepared for the potential for some hurricane conditions to be moving into your area late in the day on Saturday. And again, unfortunately, this is going to be the wrong timestamp. This is just the local time of the issuance, but this would be late in the day on Saturday with the track. And then actually Tammy is forecast to strengthen a little bit more as it moves north of the islands. But we'll talk a lot more about the potential tracks coming up. But again, as I've mentioned, all of these areas in the northern Leeward Islands, everyone is right now under a tropical storm watch, which could get upgraded to warnings as well. And again, that does include Anguilla, and St. Martin. Now off towards the west, what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing not in that area, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, but that doesn't mean that those areas couldn't potentially be impacted by tropical storm conditions if Tammy were to move a little bit farther to the north and the west. Let's look at the GFS model. I've got the broad perspective. I definitely want to zoom in on that. And again, what you're looking at here, and this is not going to move, is the 11 AM advisory from the National Hurricane Center, so you get an idea of what Tammy is like at this present time. Now, the GFS model continues to keep the core of Tammy just off to the east of the islands. I have mentioned this now for about the last 5 days, but the buffer between the core of Tammy on the GFS moving across the islands and staying away continues to shrink, and that's been a problem. The GFS has always been the strongest model with Tammy, and now we're starting to see it shift farther and farther west, more in line with some of the other models. So again, concern. Now, the best scenario, the absolute best case scenario, is that we get that recurve to happen east of the islands, because the strongest winds, the heaviest rain will occur along the direct path of Tammy and to the eastern side of the center of circulation. So if we can get that recurve to happen east of the islands, we'll be in much better shape. But you can see, and again, from time to time, we see a little bit of a clearing out in the center there. So I just want to stop it here just to give you an idea. Yesterday, that buffer from the GFS model was over 200 miles. Now, for the eastern side of Antigua, we're down to about 67. It's not great. Tropical storm winds, as a matter of fact, extend out. Let me see here if I can find it for you real quick. They extend out 125 miles from the center. That's already with Tammy, and a stronger Tammy is expected over the Leeward Islands. So again, strongest winds, and the winds away from the center would be highest on the northeastern side, but this is a very close approach. We can take a look at those winds right now in the GFS model, same model, gonna throw that into motion for you. And again, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit, but we're getting closer to the core of those winds moving through, especially the Leeward Islands. The curve here from the GFS keeps it a little bit away from the northern side of the Windward Islands. But again, for our friends in the far northern Leeward Islands, from Antigua to Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Anguilla, again, closer and closer, and the GFS model is unfortunately one of the models that's farther off towards the east. The others are a little bit more over the islands. And again, I'm going to go over the specific impacts coming up in just a second, but just want to show you these models as well. And then we'll take a look at the total precipitation, because rainfall is going to be an issue as well, with localized potential for urban and flash flooding and some mudslides in some of the higher terrain. And again, this model is kind of running through the time that I have it. Just like yesterday, if you were to go back and look at yesterday's video, these areas that were, in that 4-6 inch area or higher were well east of the islands. Now they're beginning to get closer and closer, and I'm just concerned that as we get into tomorrow and especially into early Saturday, that the GFS just slides back farther and farther west. So again, looking at this, now you're looking at, again, it's not horribly significant, for Barbuda, but not far away. 25, 30 miles, you're getting into that core of 78-inch rainfall totals, and that really is what the Hurricane Center is calling for. As a matter of fact, and we'll again look at a graphic on this, they're calling for 3 to 6 inches of rain, but even locally up to 10 inches of rain as well. Let's look at the NAM model, because that is another model that I've been showing you as well, and I'm going to just take a second here to reset things on this model. And again, these are just models. They're not set in stone. They're not gospel, but we're close enough in time now where we can start to rely on this information a little bit more as well. So going back again to the NAM model, this is going to show you a much more direct impact to the islands. It's a weaker storm compared to the GFS model, and hopefully would keep it as a tropical storm. So again, I mentioned it yesterday in the live chat that the Hurricane Center is going with the more direct route and impacts to the northern windward and leeward islands, and also the stronger solutions making Tammy a hurricane up on the northern leeward islands. So it's kind of taking the GFS strength, but the forecast tracks of the European and other models like the NAM. And you could see that this would then spread more rain and stronger winds over to the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, including St. Croix and St. Thomas. So there certainly is still some play with this, but we're really running out of time for Tammy to make some kind of unexpected turn to get us out of the way. So more and more likely now, again, friends, we are looking at the potential for some significant impacts for the northern windward and the leeward islands, potentially even the Virgin Islands as well. And you can see this on the NAM model. The winds are much more in line with the track from the Hurricane Center. They're a little bit weaker than the GFS model. These are gusts. These are not sustained winds, but it shows you a moderate to high-end tropical storm. And you can see the time frame as well. Basically, the time frame is going to be right on through the weekend. I can back this up and show you again as we get into tomorrow morning, beginning to move across Guadeloupe and Antigua. We lost it there just a second, but it'll pick back up again. And then moving through the northern leeward islands on Sunday, late Saturday, and then beginning to exit the area early on Sunday. Again, that is going to be the NAM model for you. I want to zoom back out real quick, show you the track one more time for the National Hurricane Center at 11 a.m. Winds are 60 miles an hour. All right, I got a lot more graphics to talk about. These are the estimated times of tropical storm force winds throughout the central and then especially the northern windward islands and the leeward islands. So I expect conditions to begin to go downhill late tonight, but especially tomorrow morning for Barbados and areas south of Guadeloupe. And then around the Guadeloupe area and other islands just to the north, we would start to see those conditions deteriorate throughout the day on Friday. Then as you get towards St. Kitts and Nevis and Barbuda and areas to the north, your conditions will start to go downhill late Friday and into Saturday. These are the earliest arrival of tropical storm force winds, but again, even hurricane conditions could accompany those a little bit later in time. This is the European model track of Tammy. Shows you not much of a difference from what I just mentioned here, but again, you're looking at a storm that is sneaking into the Leeward Islands, and if we can keep the center east of the islands, it's the best case scenario, but obviously you saw the track for the Hurricane Center barrels it right through. This is also the HWRF model. This is going to be moving very slowly into time, but I just want to show you as many model solutions as I possibly can. This begins to wrap up a stronger storm as well. You'll start to see the islands, there's Barbados, come into play. And again, this is going to scrape the central and the northern side of the Leeward Islands, but it's a much more significant storm, more in line with the GFS. It does keep the core just east of the islands, which would be great news. But again, several solutions are in pretty tight agreement, pretty good clustering of that. Euro rainfall totals anywhere that you see red or higher amounts is more than 3 inches. It's interesting because the European model is more over the northern Leeward Islands, but it still tries to keep the core of the heaviest rain just like the GFS just east of the islands. And the waves are going to be another significant story. Again, in the yellows, those are 10-foot wave heights. We could have 10, 12, 14-foot waves on the eastern side of the islands. We're going to have very long period, dangerous swells, very rough surf and sea conditions throughout the islands, especially on the eastern side as Tammy moves through. Again, that will start later this evening throughout Friday and Saturday across the northern windward and the Leeward Islands. So again, the areas that I expect to be impacted are the ones that I'm listed below. I would also say that the eastern side of Puerto Rico could see some gusty winds and some heavier rain. But at this point in time, more than likely, we'll not see sustained tropical storm conditions. Obviously, the exact track of Tammy will determine that. But I've mentioned all of these areas, but you can get a good idea again of who we're talking about and if you live in these areas. Now, let's break down the potential impacts. This is direct messaging from the National Hurricane Center. This is not me coming up with what I think based on models. This is directly from the advisories. And as far as specific impacts, that's what I'm going to be sticking to. We can talk about, the different forecast tracks and the potential scenarios, but for the messaging for our friends in the northern windward and the Leeward Islands, this is from the Hurricane Center. They expect tropical storm winds of 55 to 73 miles an hour possible by tomorrow throughout the northern windward and the Leeward Islands. Hurricane force winds 74 miles per hour or slightly greater are possible in portions of the Leeward Islands Friday night and into Saturday. Generally speaking, the farther north that you live, the higher that potential is going to be as Tammy slowly strengthens. Rainfall 3 to 6 inches with a maximum of 10 inches across portions of the northern windward and the Leeward Islands. 1 to 2, maybe up to 4 inches of rain for the Virgin Islands, U.S. and British Virgin Islands, and the eastern sides of Puerto Rico. And of course, some of this rain may produce flash flooding and urban flooding and mudslides in higher terrain. You know your area, you know those low-lying areas. With this kind of rainfall, potentially 3 to 6 inches and locally higher amounts, that could lead to some of that localized flooding. We talked about storm surge of 1 to 3 feet. This will obviously kick up some dangerous sea conditions, some very dangerous swells and rip currents. And I'll mention it one more time, friends, to please consult your local government for detailed information in your area, the latest on the watches and warnings, the latest on what you need to do as Tammy heads your way. Again, I will continue to keep you updated with these videos. We'll be doing more of those. Also look for our live stream. We'll take our radar information in our computer and we run that live for you. It will update in real time the satellite imagery of Tammy, the tracks, the updated forecast from the Hurricane Center, real-time radar, real-time temperatures. So again, pop into the live tab and look for that if you want information in between these videos. Our friends in the Windward and Leeward Islands, we're thinking about you. Please stay safe. We'll get you updated. Please check in with your local governments for the more detailed local information in your area. Thank you for liking the video. And again, if you want the newest forecast from Meteo Mundo and know when we are going live, please click that subscribe button and we'll see you shortly.